44th anniversary of the tragic crash of PSA Flight 182 in North Park. 4 years ago, I had the chance to talk to several people who witnessed the crash. Take a look.
Coming up on 9 o'clock, and I hear a horrendous noise.
And we just quickly turned, and you can't believe what you're seeing.
Everything turned black, and I thought, this is it.
It was horrible. I'll never forget it.
Pacific Southwest Airlines was San Diego's own. Based at Lindbergh Field, many of the airline's employees called San Diego home. Known for its friendly, affordable service and the trademark smile underneath the nose of each plane, "Catch Our Smile" was their slogan. On September 25th, 1978, everything changed for PSA, countless lives, and a North Park neighborhood in a matter of seconds. A PSA 727 was on approach to Lindbergh Field when it collided with a much smaller Cessna. 144 people were killed, including 7 people on the ground. Returning to the site of the crash, we were able to speak with some neighbors about the experience of having what was at the time the worst air disaster in U.S. history happen right in front of them. Lisa Bills was a teenager studying for a biology test inside her home just 4 houses down from the crash site.
I hear a horrendous noise, and I kind of glanced out the window, but I couldn't see anything, but it got louder and louder and louder. And all of a sudden it was over the house, and I hear this crash and the ground shakes. I jumped up, and I don't know how to this day I did it, but I got dressed and out the door in under a minute and saw the crash site, which was right over here, all the way across the street, and there were body parts everywhere and just fire everywhere.
Across the street, a house was on fire. Lisa knew it was home to a daycare. Her father ran across the street to see if he could help anyone.
It's the one time I was really happy I didn't follow my dad, because my dad went in the backyard and saw the kids.
When the jet impacted the ground at Dwight and Nile, it burst open and cartwheeled, sending most of its contents, including passengers, in a southwesterly direction toward Boundary Street. Lisa's best friend, Sharon Slay, lived on the other side of the crash. Her home was in the debris field, but the crash took out the phone lines and movement through the neighborhood was restricted.
We didn't know what was within it. We didn't know. We honestly, if you talk about not knowing whether somebody's dead or alive, we had no idea. I didn't know who was home, if Lisa was at school. I had no idea who was home.
Eventually, they would find out that their friends were all okay, but the experience of the crash and its aftermath would resonate with them even today.
Everything was on fire, all the power poles, the backyards. It had landed, crashed into the backyards of these homes. There was actually right over here, there was a bungalow, and somebody was in a seat and went through the wall. And I remember my dad saying, "Oh, I really wonder if they knew what was happening when they hit." And I kind of looked up at the wall, and it was just so bright. And the starkness of that bright wall, with where you could see where the bodies had hit the wall, and it was like one of those chalk outlines of a crime scene. But it was very, very stark and very real. It's a very real moment.
Sharon's sister, Becky, was a senior at Hoover High School and watched the crash unfold from the campus.
Me and my cousin were standing outside on El Cajon Boulevard right in front of Hoover when we heard the boom where the Cessna hit the PSA. And we looked up and we saw the PSA, the wing on fire, and the Cessna came down, and then we watched as what it seemed like took forever, the PSA coming down. And then as it was coming down, we were actually praying for the people on board. And when it hit, though, I knew where it was. I don't know why, but I knew.
Frightened and confused, Becky ran into the school and found a phone to use to check on her family.
And I called the main line in my house and no one answered. So I called my phone because I had a phone in my bedroom. And my little sister answered it, screaming bloody murder. And then the phone died. So I had no idea if they were alive, if the house was on fire. I had no idea what was happening.
Becky would soon learn that her family was okay, but the experience would stay with her well into adulthood.
I never look at a plane the same again. I think I've only been on a plane once in my life because of that. It's just something that most people will never experience or understand.
Michael Bagnus was with friends in between school classes just a few blocks away and heard the planes collide.
We heard this boom, and we just quickly turned, and you know, you can't believe what you're seeing. And then it looked like it was in slow motion. You could see the flame reflecting in the windows. I could feel the people screaming. It's all I could feel. And then it hit the ground, and I mean, the ground shook like it was an earthquake. When I think about my friend Joe, who lost his house, then I think about my friend Louisa, who lost her mother. You know, and her story is her birthday's the 24th. Her mom was flying home from Sacramento for the first time ever on a plane. And she got called out of class. She was kind of excited. Wow, I'm getting called out of class. My mom's probably home. We're going to celebrate my birthday because mom wasn't home yesterday. And instead, she gets the news her mom was on the plane. And I think how many regrets I would have had, because I don't remember if I told my mom that morning I loved her before I left the house. I just think how regretful I would have been if my house had been one of the ones that got destroyed. I cried tears of feeling blessed, but feeling sad for everyone else, because it was devastating.
I just got chills watching this.
Michael's quite a story. All of them, they were wonderful to sit down and talk to us, and we were out at the crash site. And, you know, if you were in San Diego at that time, I was 12 years old, and I'll never forget it. I was at junior high and went into the office, and everybody was listening to an AM radio transmission. But that was the first part. Now, here's what I'll tell you. We're going to have part 2 coming up in the 8 o'clock hour. That crash changed aviation in San Diego forever. It led to the separation of the smaller Cessna-type airplanes and the larger jets. There was only one localizer at that time in San Diego, so if pilots wanted in smaller planes to practice instrument landings and approaches and things, they had to go to Lindbergh Field. Well, after this, the light bulbs went off, and they started installing them at Palomar, Montgomery, Gillespie, so now they could keep all of the small traffic away from the larger passenger planes. And they would fly tight downwinds and base and final legs, but now if you know where to look, you'll hear a plane overhead sometimes in my neighborhood, which is the west end of Mission Valley. And you look way up and you'll see a jetliner way up there, and then they go all the way out to East County, and that's when they make their turn and head in. And they just it was very different then. There was some technology you'll see in part 2 that was just coming of age then, but you'll learn a lot about how that crash changed aviation and why we don't have to worry about that happening in San Diego again. So part 2's coming up. That was one of the toughest days for San Diego ever.
Well, thank you for sharing this story as well, but just hearing from the residents sharing their experience like it just happened yesterday. It was just so emotional.
And when you're out there with them, that was her house, this was the other girl's house, Sharon's house, and they talk about it, like you said, like it was just yesterday, but to be out there with them at the crash site talking about that day, it's pretty eerie, but part of San Diego's history, unfortunately. All right, it's time to